Hey guys, welcome back to Star Wars Timeline. My name is Ben. Today I'm very happy to welcome Steve from Stevie B channel. I'll drop the links in the video description below. Please go check out his brand new awesome Star Wars channel. He has some really great content on it. How are you doing, Steve? I've seen some recent content of yours. I've seen some recent reviews. You guys are talking about Tales of the Jedi graphic novel with Revanchist, another YouTuber which I'm intending to check out. What's going on, man?
Hey, it's an honor to be here. You're too kind with your introduction, man.
Likewise.
I just want to say, if it wasn't for you being one of the first YouTubers that I came across when I got back into the Star Wars side of things, I wouldn't have the courage to do this. You inspired me. So thanks again for that, Ben. I appreciate it. You're excellent.
When I blow up and make the Benjamin Film Studios occupy a greater portion of Hollywood, I'll make sure I include you somewhere in the credits.
Appreciate that, brother. So yeah, Tales of the Jedi, the
Mhm.
Revanchist. You got to check him out. He's excellent. He does
Mhm.
narrations. He's like the guru. He got me involved with it.
Nice.
So yeah, we covered that. I've been doing good. I just this morning I finished up the Phantom Menace novelization.
Aha, nice.
Excellent. Terry Brooks did a great job,
hmm
especially some of the dialogue that he added with Darth Maul.
hmm
Very stellar.
You know, it's
But
funny. We've started talking about it before we rolled the recording, and it's something that I've been always putting on the side. Like, I've seen the movies; these could wait. Let me focus on other books because obviously the reading list is so huge. But I'm keep hearing these positive feedback, like from prequels, novelizations, the original saga, even the sequels. They benefit from these added scenes and getting inside the minds of these characters. Just an extra fun part for the fans.
oh, absolutely,
hmm
absolutely. And I'm currently kind of reading through the timeline from the beginning of
hmm
what they show us in the books. So Rogue Planet is next on the list. I haven't read Revenge of the Sith or Attack of the Clones, but I heard they're great.
hmm
So yeah, I'm
Awesome.
enjoying them. Yeah.
Nice. Guys, so the topic of our podcast is I wanted to speak with you about the iconography and religious motifs in Star Wars. But before we get into it, just a couple of general questions. So for those fans of mine who haven't seen your content before, they get the chance to kind of meet Steve and like just get the basics. What is your relationship with the Star Wars franchise? And the first thing I always enjoy asking is, what are some of your happiest memories watching Star Wars?
Oh, just that immediately what comes to mind is just that it feels safe.
Mm.
When I was a kid, I used to fall asleep to them. I was scared of the boogeyman at times. I'll be honest,
Yeah.
probably till I was maybe 11 or 12. You can pick on me for that.
Yeah.
So I would always watch it. It just made me feel safe.
hmm
Um, just Luke inspired me. He was strong, started off as a kid, made his way through, became the hero, the
hmm
savior, and he was just an average person. So it's
hmm
always that safe feeling to me. And that's what brought me back to the fandom.
That's really, really interesting. Speaking of Luke, actually, one of the reasons that I wanted to emulate him and I was so inspired by him as a kid living in Russia in the 80s and having access to Star Wars via like VHS tapes, he looked like my older cousin. He was also my older cousin. He practiced martial arts. He was young and like kind of had the same physique, not very tall, but like quite muscled and lean. And I was just, is that my cousin in the movie? Well, obviously that's not him. But it's like, oh, wow, they're so similar. Maybe I can be like my cousin. Maybe I can be like Luke. Is that relationship of a child to an adult that they really looked up to? So that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Do you have a personal preference? Like, what is your go-to medium? Is it movies, shows, maybe comic books?
Well, lately I've been getting into the comic book side of things,
hmm
but the movies for sure and the TV shows. I'm very pleased with what they've been bringing to us on the Disney Plus side of things with Kenobi and Mandalorian, the Book of Boba Fett.
Right.
So and that's brought my family into it as well, my wife and my kids.
hmm
So that's something cool to share with them because they don't. I didn't really show I was in and out of the fandom.
Right.
So I didn't really raise my kids up on it,
hmm
unfortunately, like some of others get to do now. But yeah, the movies for sure.
I think your kids will then have the benefit of having like fresh set of eyes and actually reinterpreting it in their own way instead of like, oh, this is what daddy always loves. Maybe we can watch it too. Maybe they'll have a complete total discovery. Like, just a blind watch could be quite an interesting
Yeah,
experience with them.
for sure. My boys are 12 and 14 and they come down here and they look and they bring their friends down here and like check this out, and
Nice.
they're looking at this stuff and they're like, who's this guy? Who's
Mhm.
Dash Randar on this, and it's like, well,
Yeah.
then I try to get into a thing and then they disappear.
And for kids, I imagine, even for adults, comic books is such a great gateway because, you might look at a thick, dusty book on daddy's desk and like, I don't want to stay with this. It's a little intimidating. You throw like an issue of a comic book with beautifully, a beautiful illustration on the cover and you say, oh, what is this? I want to check it out. That visual component of it like immediately pulls you in, right?
Yep. Grabs you.
Yeah.
I've been kind of showing them because I just recently picked up actually the Old Republic Volume 2. And, that was sitting, like you said, up on the counter. And they grabbed it and kind of paged through it. But they're not there yet. I'll get them there.
Yeah. And start talking about the Star Wars, what George Lucas brought to the pop culture. And of course, we, as Star Wars fans, we know the story of Joseph Campbell and how this theologian kind of like influenced George Lucas and other great film directors, James Cameron, Steven Spielberg, you name it. All of these film directors, they brought all of these epic tales that are so near and dear to us to the table. What do you think is the function of modern storytelling and in general?
I guess it depends on what kind of story you're trying to tell, right? We want a good storyline. We want something that grabs us from the beginning. I feel like George Lucas executed that very well, especially with The New Hope right off the bat. Everybody was enticed by that. And then it just continued to grow from there. I feel like he kind of set the stage for these James Cameron, Steve. I know Steven Spielberg and him worked together, but I just feel like George was the one step that made everybody grab onto that. It's like, we got to kind of mimic what he's doing there, but in a different tale.
Right. That's interesting.
What's your thoughts on that?
I mean, I pretty much, as somebody who is a great, study of Joseph Campbell's work, I love what he said, that these filmmakers, directors use the medium to reinterpret what myth means for the modern audience, the modern fairy tale, and they brought it to the mass audience because now more fans have access to their favorite stories than ever before, right? If in ancient times you carved up your myth, like the myth of Gilgamesh somewhere on the tablet, and it's standing there, it's immediately available only within the vicinity of people that could visit this lab and go check it out and retell the story orally to one another, right? Because that's how most of the tradition has been passed on from generation to generation, orally. Right, but still, you're limited to your geographic location. Now you show a movie and kids in Siberia will watch Avatar. They watch it somewhere in Indonesia. I'm like, oh my God, did you like this character? I like that character. And share the experiences on the social media. And we're all connected, right?
Right.
And, there's also a moment there that I wanted to kind of underline and just ask your opinion. Do you ever separate or kind of analyze and look at the film and say, there's a moment of pause and you think, what was the original creator's intent here in this scene, in this movie, in this story, or this trilogy, and the actual legacies that is left behind after there's nobody else to talk to or no one else to ask a question from? What did you mean in this part here?
Wow. Yeah, that's a pretty good one, man. To be honest with you, I think what would stand out to me in that moment is when I'm going to go to the Phantom Menace here.
Sure.
Qui-Gon Jinn, Darth Maul, Obi-Wan, running down the corridor. He drops, gets to his knees in the heat of battle with his opponent, just beyond the wall. And he finds himself with calmness there. I think maybe in that moment, that was how you would realize, okay, something bad's happening. I need to step back, calm myself, find that connection, bring balance. You know what I'm saying?
Of course.
And then
like the calm in the storm.
Yes. Like we all go through, there's tough journeys ahead of us. You got to kind of just bring it in, breathe, meditate, if you will.
Right.
That's kind of a first that comes to my mind.
But do you ever analyze, like, hold on a second, is this an attribute that fans bestow upon an image, or is it something that the creator has intended? Because oftentimes you have artists, which I think is totally fine. They sort of create something and they throw it out there and it's in the public eye and the audience interprets it. And they say, George, this is a really significant piece of art. Is that what you meant? Yeah, that's exactly what I meant. That's exactly what I wanted to do. Do you ever analyze it from that angle?
No, I'm
No.
gonna be just completely honest with you. No,
Hmm.
not unless we're gonna talk about like the religious side of things, maybe
Right.
because I know Star Wars has always had that kind of tie.
Hmm.
Even back, when it first came out, like folks were kind of questioning
Hmm.
what's George doing here. With I mean his, because there's all kinds of different beliefs out there,
Right.
right? So
So
that's
this is actually going to be the primary focus. So I was leading our thoughts, focusing them, narrowing them down into
okay.
what I actually want to discuss with you today, and it's all of that. But before we get to the actual
Yep.
discussion, what I wanted to do is pull up a couple of Merriam-Webster definitions here, just to kind of give the fans and ourselves check marks of what exactly we're talking about. And obviously, you and I will have our own definitions from what is standard, from what is written in the public library or Webster's dictionary, because we all interpret and absorb information differently. But here are just the three common terms that I wanted to throw out there, guys. First one is theology. And Webster's dictionary says as follows: theology is the study of religious faith, practice, and experience, especially the study of God and God's relation to the world. So that's the first item here. Next one is iconography. The traditional or conventional images or symbols associated with a subject, and especially a religious or legendary subject. Pictorial material illustrating a subject. So we got theology, we got iconography, and the last one is symbology. Symbology is the art of expression by symbols, which symbols in turn are something that stands for or suggests something else by a reason of relationship, association, convention, or very important here, accidental resemblance. Okay, so we have these three items. Sorry for the kind of long-winded explanation, guys. We're not trying to be super smart here. We're just trying to like find common ground because we possibly will be throwing these terms out there, so we are sort of on the same page. Um, and this is where I want to start. Since the dawn of time, storytelling at the campfire for the prehistoric man has been essential to our daily life, right? From earliest evidence of spiritual thought, the worship of the sun, the life-giving disk of the sun, to modern religious or spiritual like behavior where we elevate superheroes from comic books, we worship celebrities or certain ideologies, and we kind of repeat the same patterns, even though we might not call ourselves, I'm no longer religious, I'm no longer Christian or Jewish, etc., but we still kind of repeat the same behavioral patterns that the prehistoric man has. And my first question is, what does religion mean to you personally, but also generally? Like if you look at it zoomed out a little bit globally.
So I grew up. I'm a Christian.
Hmm.
Okay, this might be a long-winded explanation and answer here
Go
to
for
your
it.
question, but I used to go to church. Nothing against it.
Hmm.
My family, my dad, recently kind of got back into faith,
Hmm.
especially with how the world is. But about a year and a half ago, I had a health condition come up, changed my life for the rest of my life now.
Right.
So I dug into religion. I was reading the Bible every day, trying to find why this happened to me, help
Hmm.
me. Because when something bad happens, immediately everybody that I've known or known of goes right to religion, even if they're not really a religious person. And just so everybody knows, I don't have no background in religion and I'm not against any kind of religion.
Right.
So I prayed and prayed and prayed, looking for an answer, asking for an answer,
Hmm.
and nothing. I didn't get a response, which brought me back to Star Wars, my safety blanket. I got back involved here. So I'm learning that from when I was a kid till now, there's a whole bunch of stuff that happened, right?
Right.
So after reading and getting more in the lore inside of things, I mean, I even did a little bit of Buddhism reading, trying the meditation and all
Hmm.
that. But the Force, now this might sound crazy to some people, but like if you think about it, how everything is connected through life, right? We need water to survive and to make things grow. We need trees and plants to grow food, oxygen. There's this bug that does this specific thing, but this other bug eats that bug, and now you got a reptile that like everything when you think about it. Um, and I might get a little emotional, so I'm sorry, but my grandfather passed away a few years
Hmm.
ago, and I was there shortly after. He did it at home peacefully.
Hmm.
And like when you see that, there was no life there. There was no spirit. The spark, the
Right.
energy was gone. You know.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, my thoughts on religion have a lot of questions, and I know that might have been a little bit too deep, but
No, I love it.
I'm an honest, truthful person.
I love that how you're expressing yourself. You're a very, very expressive person, and how you basically are through your own words, your own experience, you're bringing this full circle. I love how you make this comparison to just animal world, right? How it's all interconnected. Remember that beautiful scene in The Last Jedi when Luke asks Rey, "What do you feel?" And she basically, through that whole very quick montage, you see the whole circle of life, that everything is interconnected, one thing with another. So I don't know of any more meaningful, deeper way of somebody describing their experience. Because once again, I stress all the time that, look, you don't have to align yourself with a certain group of people or religious faith to kind of recognize this need, this essential elemental necessity to try to understand that it's something that exists outside of yourself, and it's all connected by one thing. And I don't think it's wild or funny at all to view Star Wars and the Force in that light, because all George Lucas is doing is rearranging the same pieces, and he's just delivering it to you in a new kind of like skin or in an outer surface. But it's timeless elements that we all recognize and we can identify with, and that's why they move us so much. I mean, if it was just a dummy kind of like blockbuster movie, like, I don't know, Fast and the Furious, nobody would have a holiday. Star Wars has its own holiday. Like,
Yeah.
Come on, man. What other film does that? So all of these attributes that we give the Star Wars franchise, I think are very, very valid. Last quick question I have for you, just in very general terms, without trying to get too deep, or if you feel, please try to go as deep as you like. I'm not trying to hold you down. Do you make a separation between an organized religion as a social event versus spirituality, or no?
No, not really.
Mm.
I understand. I can see both what you're kind of trying to say there. Yeah, and no, it doesn't affect me.
Mm.
I'm not bothered by it at all.
See, my religious experience, I'm a Russian Jew, and my grandfather was, who also passed away, he was the more on the spiritual side, along with my mom. But he never kind of like told us, it's made a point out of it that Saturday you have to go synagogue with me, or do this, do that. It was always an invitation. It was always up to the child, no matter what age you were, to try to experience it, explore it, and ask questions. Oh, what does this holiday mean? What do we do? And honestly, when I started growing up and I came to America, I was 14, being introduced to a whole different culture and a set of ideas here in New York City. It's like very international. Then I went to college, interacting with different people, different faith, different beliefs. And I started recognizing what really pulled me in as a kid was the ritual of it. It wasn't the higher knowledge, the deeper questions, just the ritual. Oh, wow, this holiday comes. My mom is going to gather us at the table with her beautiful food. My grandpa is going to say a line here. It's just that family communion, that social function of it really pulled me in, and I enjoyed that. So that was that for me. But I do separate that aspect of it versus something that is spiritual, like you were saying, where I would personally categorize something like, hey, look, I'm this person, Steve, and I have this great question, and it moves me a lot, and I want to try to find an answer. Maybe I will resort to kind of like some Buddhist ideas and see if I can identify these things which exist in my personal life and make a connection there. To me, that component is specifically spirituality, that inner search. It's nothing to do with the social function. It's nothing to do with the ritual. Of course, you can combine them and have them two together. I'm not trying to sever one from the other, but I kind of make that distinction.
I will say though, I do feel on the gatherings and the holidays now, they're more commercial driven. They want you to spend money on them rather than what it should be or was
You're right.
supposed to be about,
Right.
in a sense.
Yeah, because different people, right, get to interpret the very same lines differently, depending where you go,
Right.
from family to family, country to country, right? We're all very different human beings. And, obviously there are many theologists that became prominent throughout the world. We have many gods, from Ra to Zeus to Odin, and many share common traits, but they also have their own versions of the truth. right?
Right.
In the Judeo Christian traditions, is I am the one and true God. Like I am the center, I am the only one, and there are no other gods. Their own versions of the truth. So, what do you think, Steve? Did gods create us, or did we create gods?
I ask myself that too.
Mm,
And sometimes I find myself thinking that, like, who, if, like you said, you think about it, there's so many different types of religions and beliefs all over.
mhm.
Odin, Zeus, Valhalla, heaven, all these different,
Hindu traditions, Native American traditions.
yes.
Hmm.
And it, maybe they're right. How come, Christians, I'm not against them,
Right.
right? Or I'm not, but how come we're all, that's what, it's this way and that's it. There's nothing else.
Nothing
I don't,
predates that, right?
right. It's like that kind of bothers me because, yeah, but to answer your question, that's a good one. I'm 50-50.
It's
That's
open,
right
right?
where I'm at right now. Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. I really, really like that. I like the idea that we created gods in our own image because this is a great way for us to kind of like zoom out, distance ourselves from our earthly life, and
Yes.
take a really good look at ourselves, right? That's why you would create somebody like Zeus, a god with a high temperament in your image, and you can scrutinize and analyze and criticize him, but not us. And say,
Right.
but look, even if the god can behave himself in such a manner, maybe that's why we are like him and we're just his children. So it's kind of like a reverse psychology there. But also, maybe they created us. Maybe there are forces that exist outside of the mind, the comprehension, and with the visible, the eye can see, that we have to recognize that there's a possibility of that, right? We can't even peer into the farther galaxy with our instruments. So there could be things that we are just not aware of.
Right. And I agree. And to
Mhm.
touch on that a little bit, who's to say, like, these scriptures and stories were told so many times by so many different people through the course of time now.
Right.
Back then there was no technology, so who's to say a guy didn't eat some mushrooms, some bad mushrooms,
Right.
have a hallucination, think he sees something, tell somebody, they're ready, you know what I'm saying? Like
Right.
that, we just don't, we don't truly know,
Hmm.
really.
And that's, of course, one of the most powerful concepts of faith, where you're supposed to give yourself fully without knowing, right? That's the power of faith, power of belief, that you're not supposed to question, you're not supposed to know, because it is outside of the scope of your comprehension,
Right.
right? We're just this one small unit here, and this is vast, huge galaxy. But and the next question I have for you, which I always find very intriguing, very interesting, um, why do human beings have the impulse to worship something? Like we talked about earlier, the first evidence of worship, one was the burial of the dead, and how the first prehistoric men treated their dead, how they had the whole ceremonial rites of putting them in the ground. And the other one is the sun worship, the life giver.
Yeah, I think that it gives us something to hold on to. It's
Mm.
that back end of the faith, like bringing it back to us. Okay, there's somebody that's in a higher power
Mm-hmm.
that's going to look after my loved one or the newborn one.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to pray, light a candle, whatever your style is, that how you want to worship.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, and it always brings you there if something bad happens,
Right.
right?
That great emotional or stress, right?
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
like
Yeah, I always found that it's there's several elements. When I was taking a lot of humanities courses in my community college before I went to an art school, and I was taking classes on classical, mythology, and the Greco-Roman thought. And for me, a lot of those things made sense. What my professors were saying, that it's the basic fear, the fear of the unknown. When the men, if you believe in evolutionary theory, that we descended from the greater apes, the moment we jumped from the tree and stood up upright from that tall grass, the moment you identify a threat, that giant saber-toothed cat, that innate fear that there's something more powerful than you are, kind of birthed that first initial seed of worshiping something that's greater than yourself. Supplication before greater forces, like natural disasters, like a great flood, which is described in almost every religious practice in the world, or something like a great fire or a thunderstorm or an earthquake that destroys like an island or something in ancient Greece. When you observe something like this, and obviously those people were not dumb, they were not stupid, they just didn't have sciences or instruments to kind of like identify what these things were. And because you're in the dark, because you have that huge question mark, you need to start making sense of it. Otherwise, you go crazy. You need to figure out, what is this? They obviously weren't probably thinking, oh, upon that mountain, probably there's a god who throws lightning bolts. No, they were just giving it a description to kind of like make sense and orderly things in their world and say, okay, this is how we're going to exist. This is what this is for now.
Yeah.
Right?
That's perfect. Very well.
Is Star Wars a religion?
In Star Wars itself,
Mm-hmm.
there is a religion. I mean, the Jedi, the monks in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
And when somebody dies, they know what happens. Like they go to be one with the Force.
Right.
Right? The religion. Which makes sense when you think about it, how everything has to be connected.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I would say, yeah, why not?
Yeah. Definitely, when you look, especially the expanded universe, and I'm sure we will see it in canon stories as well as it gets, time to develop. There are a lot of different factions and groups in Legends which recognize worship, sometimes calling the Force something different, but they're all sing the same song. They recognize that there's this power which connects all life in the galaxy, and they just experience it differently. If the Jedi feel that they have to stand between the darkness and the light with their lightsabers ignited, other groups treat it entirely differently. There's even groups which say, like, no, you can't use it for violence in any shape or form, even defense.
Right. And some have their own interpretations of it too, like you said. I mean,
Right.
It's all connected, but they do it a little differently.
Mm-hmm.
It's always interesting to me when you come across a new explanation inside one of the novels.
Yeah.
And, even in the new Disney canon stuff, I mean, they already are touching on subjects that are happening in our society today. And I'm not getting into all that because I don't, I'm a
Right.
fly straight kind of guy. I'm the middle of the road. But yeah, I mean, from what I've read so far, they touch on it, and that's interesting.
And of course, I add an extra layer to it and say that we as Star Wars fans, myself included, would also once again practice these religious kind of like behaviors with Star Wars content itself, because there is the messenger, George Lucas, and he might have had a particular intent with this one movie, right? He often is quoted when he created the original 1977 film. It's like, I just wanted to make a fun movie. He literally wanted to drag families into theaters so you could go in, pay that price ticket, he gets the money, you get the good time, right? That's the basics of it. And of course, there is the message itself, which is carries on. And I make an argument that all art is a shared experience. It's you as an artist showing me something, and it's up to me to interpret it. And if you're a good author, good painter, good artist, you provide a lot of like playground, intellectual playground, a lot of not plot holes, like, unknowns, let's say, that the audience get to interpret and internalize it in their own personal ways. That's a very religious kind of like approach.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And it, like you said, family. That's what it's about. That's what Star Wars is about. And like you said, it created its own family. It's the only thing ever that has its own holiday that everybody comes together on.
Pretty crazy,
in the
right?
same way. Like, think about that. That's a mind blower. We all walks of life come together for that day.
Yeah. And it's really awesome when the Star Wars fandom is at its best, and we recognize each other's differences, that we could all look at the same image or character and view them in different light and share it, and not to try to take away it from one another. I think it's a really beautiful thing, and I'm really, really happy to be part of it. Today, Steve, I wanted us to focus on one aspect, because I realized we could possibly have many podcasts together, but I would certainly love to invite you as much as possible. But today I wanted to focus on iconography. I wanted to take apart, well, not take apart, I'm sorry. I wanted to take a closer look at a couple of scenes which are obviously talked about in the fandom. They obviously are very significant, and they mean a lot to us, whether George Lucas had that specific goal for them or whether it's something that became a thing of its own and gained its own life through fandom through the years of being in the public eye.
Yeah.
And the first iconic scene I wanted to talk about is obviously Luke Skywalker and the Binary Suns. That very, very important Tatooine scene. You know, the correlation to the significant identifiable concepts, whether we look at that image and you don't have to think long and hard to start looking just a mere photography of it and start seeing, recognizing patterns there, which
Yes.
kind of translate to real life. You know, Luke gazing long, hard at that, you know, horizon line, and you know, we sense that inner conflict in Mark Hamill's performance, and of course the dual nature of life, these two discs traveling upon, you know, the sky. What significance does it have for you personally?
Well, we've all had that moment. It doesn't even have to be in Star Wars where,
Mm.
you know, right away, beautiful comes to mind when you see that. Just beautiful, iconic. The thought of wonder, you know, wonder what's going to happen. Hope. I mean, that's why it's titled A New Hope, you know, hope. But
Right.
we've all had that moment in our lives where we've just stopped and stared and thought long and hard, whether it was about a family member, a job, what's going on in the world, where you just, and all of it comes rushing in. And that's what comes to mind for me in that moment.
Yeah.
What about yourself?
I also, it's my favorite Star Wars film, by the way. When I look at that particular scene, first of all, I love Mark Hamill's performance in every Star Wars film. I just love him. Sometimes, you know, there's arguments to be made that some lines of dialogue could have been better in The New Hope. That always goes. That's part of me and my biased nostalgia for the film, but his acting is on the point. But in that particular scene, what I sense is that teenage angst that we all feel, like a college student, like, where do I go from here? What do I do next? My dad says, get a job. My mom says, get married and start working. Like, what do I do with my life? These two dual suns, like they're rising up on the zenith of the, you know, sky, and then they're falling down. And these are your chances. You could go either this way in life or you could go this way in life, right? When you look at a lot of documentaries and you look, I just discovered this podcast called Soft White Underbelly, where this journalist just invites people over and he talks to them. And you just see what's dramatically different paths people follow based on what the environment was like, what their family situation was like. They go completely different routes. And it's all encapsulated in this one scene. And like you said, it's absolutely beautiful. But if I could just underline it was one thing, it's teenage angst.
Yeah, that's
and it's so powerful and so important, and we all feel it. Boys, girls, it's a unisex, universal theme that anybody could identify with.
And I want to point out, you said the two sons, like the which left or right. I never even thought of it that way. So us just mingling in both of our terms, what we think, you know, now I can see, yeah, I mean, they're going to veer left or I'm going to go right. And this is what's going to happen.
That's a powerful moment for the fandom and for us. Like, look, we're two strangers. We meet through the Zoom podcast. Hey, Ben, hey, Steve. And we build this link. We build this connection. Oh, this is what you... Instead of saying, no, hold on a second, let me explain to you what it means. How many fans love to jump to the situations like this and try to explain to it. Like, hold on a second. Be receptive here. That's what I personally enjoy doing. Let me hear the other side. What does it mean to you? It's just, I love that, man. It's really awesome. But aside from the beautiful image, part of this iconic scene is John Williams' score. How important for you is music married to image?
As I got older, I paid attention to it a little more, especially now. Especially, you know, when I was a kid watching these films, like I was just really cool music that kind of fit, you know. I think in certain scenes throughout the films, it really stands out. And just that the harmonics in that scene and just that sound, it brings that wonder and that angst feeling that you were talking about now. Like you could just see it, you know.
So it helps you visualize.
Yeah, I would say so, yeah.
And one thing I wanted to return to our maker, George Lucas. Where does the storyteller's tale end? In other words, where does George Lucas's thought process end in that scene, and where does the audience's imagination begin to take over? What did George Lucas mean in this scene?
Yeah, probably. I mean, because they paused there for a little while through the
Hmm.
scene. It lasted a little bit. It wasn't just like a clip and then jump to the next one.
Right.
Now, when I look at it, after seeing it over and over again, it means the same thing. But, younger as a kid, I didn't know. I wasn't sure, So, oh, I'm kind of lost at the second, Ben.
Yeah, and that's fine. You know what it is? It's I'm asking this question, but at the same time, I recognize the futility of it because what's the matter what the creator intended? Like I honestly, frankly, I recognize and admire the passion of people who are like devout scholars of George Lucas. Like for example, Star Wars theory. He follows what George Lucas says in every word, even though the man is known to have contradicted himself, like all great artists do, like all
Yep.
people do. Because our thoughts and ideals in life, they're not set in stone. They constantly move and reshape based off how we interact with other people, based on new gained experience. We always grow as individuals. You can't say I believe this for the rest of your life because you'll have a very static mind. You're not going
Yep.
to move anywhere. But and it's okay. That's not a criticism of George Lucas. I think it's an attribute that he has changed the person. His vision of his movies changes the person, and also for us, instead of dwelling of, what was the original goal here? Maybe all it was like there's a kid in the back of nowhere in this rock, and he's looking at this landscape, which is obviously alien to us because there's two suns instead of one, and he wants to get the hell out of there. That
Yep.
maybe that's all that the intent was to visually show this huge, beautiful panorama. This is his homestead. This is where this kid is. He needs to get out. See ya, Uncle Owen. I need to get out, man. I need to go to
Yeah.
college or something. But it's so important and so valid that each and every one of us has our own. We absorb it, we sponge it up in our own unique way.
Yeah. That's well said, my friend.
Next one. We're ready for the next scene here.
All right.
This is for our prequel fans. I know lots of you guys are super duper passionate about it. I suspect that you have favorite moments in there as well. I wanted to talk about Mustafar, seemingly obvious one, and Anakin's transformation. We see him go from this molten lava to the operating table, like a slab of just burnt meat, like it turning into this cold machine. It's a nightmare scene. There's literally rivers of fire. What is the visual cue here? What is George Lucas trying to point out?
That evil never wins. I mean,
Hmm.
Anakin he got persuaded by the dark side,
Right.
fought his mentor, his best friend, his father figure, we'll say in a sense, some
Mhm.
claim. Just got cut down and he's burnt, and they just throw him up like you said, up on the table like a hunk of cattle.
Mhm.
Just evil never wins.
Evil never wins. When I look, I'm very, I guess, detail oriented dude. Like I try to look at things like, oh, this shot is going this way, and there's greater detail here, and the information is flowing us from this side of the screen. I like to analyze the shots a
Yeah.
lot, and I try to draw a meaning from it. Maybe some that doesn't exist, but when you look at behind the scenes documentaries where George Lucas was making, obviously Mustafar, guys, no surprise there. Like I think we can all unanimously agree that one of the huge icons here, it's a representation of hell. It's Anakin's personal hell.
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed in the detailing of that scene how they managed to show us like a flowing lava, showing the flowing of that inner pain and suffering. Anakin is bleeding. He's hurt. He just did this terrible thing to his wife. He's fighting his best friend. I think aside from just sheer anger and aggression, there might be some mixed emotions in there too, because that's his brother in arms. They fought and bled next to each other. Kenobi's basically raised him from childhood as well, right? So alongside just anger, he's hurt as well. He consciously, no human being just does complete, like evil, and unless he's a total psychopath, it doesn't self-reflect on that, which we clearly know Vader does. We see it in the original trilogy.
Yes. I was going to say later on you see that, but at that moment, I mean, he yells at him, "I hate you," as he's seeping down and his legs are burning, and Obi-Wan's crying, kind of looking at him like, yeah,
Mhm.
lost his wife, everything, just his personal hell. But like I said, evil never wins, because he
Yeah.
didn't, you know.
Mhm.
That's just my quick interpretation, and you are very good when it comes to detail, my friend. That's one thing that drew me to you, because I never really thought of things
Yeah.
in the way that you do. And I learned from you, and I appreciate that. And I'm sure a lot of your listeners just love that about you, man, because it's just different. Not everybody has that niche like you do. And I'm being completely honest, my friend. It's
Thank you,
great.
sir. It's great here. From now on, I'll ask my all of my interviews to call me Master Ben Kenobi. No, just
All right.
kidding.
We're gonna see the YouTube name change here
Right,
after the
right. I
show
know.
here.
But also another aspect of it that I wanted to touch on the visual front is the Vader's suit, and specifically that scene. Remember when he's laying
Oh
there on
yeah.
the slab, and that helmet, the mask, is being put over his face, and we see it from the first person view, and we see these mechanical parts, these limbs being replaced. Why is it so? I was, first of all, I was shocked when I saw it in theaters. My younger brother, he's 6 years younger, he's sitting right next to me. He was old enough not to be scared, but I saw a lot of kids like doing this in the theater, like, oh my god, and their parents like covering their eyes. It's pretty scary imagery, man. Like some of the Star Wars fans that I talked to who were telling me that they saw it as kids, they were terrified of that scene. Why is it so important to show shocking imagery to kind of like just alert the mind in such a way?
I think to make something bold stand out, like
Mm.
we already know. I mean, I was fortunate to see it in the theaters as well. I was a teenager,
Mm.
and yeah,
How
I
old
mean,
were you?
I was 16,
Oh, okay.
17. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. When that came out in what, 2000 and
2006, five,
yeah, 2005.
2005. I think 5 or 6. I'm
No, I
forgetting.
was,
I'm sure fans will forgive us.
yeah.
Mhm.
So that scene before that, the burning thing, like that was pretty gruesome. It
Right.
really was for that time and for them films.
Hmm.
But when the helmet came down, maybe it was a way for George to show kids, like, hey, this is what can happen. And ultimately, this is how we see Vader in how we obviously got Vader,
Hmm.
through Anakin from the original trilogy. But just and him watching his whole life is just changed. He's probably wondering what the heck's going on.
Hmm.
He was supposed to Palpatine was supposed to take care of him, and
And give him the ultimate power.
yeah, and save his wife, and everything was going to be great as long as he just wiped out and listened to him.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can just imagine what was going through his head as well.
Yeah. One of the images that I remember strikingly as a kid. So my dad brought all 3 films on VHS tapes. It was 1987 or 88. It was our first VHS on the whole block. Our dad showed us the first, then we invited all the kids to see it. So I never remember them as separate films that I watched. It's just one continuous story. But the first image that I clearly remember when Vader walked on Tantive 4, when the stormtroopers break through and they start killing off the rebels, he was such an imposing and powerful figure. And since childhood, I recognized his helmet for being like a corpse, like almost like a skull,
Okay.
right? And when he's being encapsulated in this coffin-like mechanical suit, it's the death of Anakin Skywalker and the birth and rise of Darth Vader, because he literally he does that, right? He's like,
Yeah.
no. We see a human being end there, and this skeletal, grotesque mask, this creature. This is why I stress, like, masks are some of the most important pieces of art. I love going to the Met here in New York City, checking out masks of different cultures, like African, Native American, but also when it comes to science fiction, it's essential, man.
Yeah, that's I would like to see that. And you're right. Expect a lot of horror films. I mean, Friday the 13th. I mean, that's a
Mhm.
hockey mask, but that's everybody knows that mask
It's
because
so recognizable, right?
right. And
Yeah.
Vader's helmet the same way. So
And I
yeah,
think partially Lucas was doing that because in every Aboriginal cultures of the world, when children hit puberty and they go through the ritual of maturation and joining their tribes, becoming adults, there's always a ritual of great immense stress, with whether it's like in some Amazon tribes where you put your hand in the bee's sting or something similar to that, right? Visually, for a child to recognize and experience what suffering, pain, and death is, instead of sheltering them from that. Obviously, there's an age appropriate debate to be made
boundary,
there.
right?
Obviously, you don't show it to 4 or 5 year old kids, obviously, but at a certain point, you show it to a child, and instead of running away from that experience their entire life, and eventually when it catches up with you, it's an immense trauma. As a kid, when you get to a softer PG-13 variation of that, you say, "Aha, this is what it is," and it's important to be cognitive of that.
Oh, absolutely. And I believe, yeah, it was 2005, I think, for the film. I just want to say, and yeah, I was in my 20s, early
20s.
20s. So yeah, growing up, like we're roughly around the same age. Growing
Mm-hmm.
up, we didn't have, like, we watched movies. That was our media, or books. We read books, but like the films that we watched, I think, and some of the cartoons even helped us, like you said, shelter. I feel like a lot of kids are that way today because of how the world works and how, the social media, and
Yeah.
you got to be careful what you say now, and the participation trophies, and
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean? And you mentioned the Amazon tribes, and yeah, they would come back if they passed their test or succeeded staying out in the wild, and they would get, they would have their, everyone in the tribe would do that,
Mm-hmm.
especially
And
Native
now
American.
recognize you as an adult, responsible member of the community, and you're no longer a child. Don't fear. Don't fear the
Exactly.
pain. Don't fear death. There's something greater. There's something more powerful than all of us. I think these are all essential to us, no matter how cynical or how your science devout we become, because science in its own right can be just as fanatical, just as absolute as the most religious fanatics are. If you don't
Yeah.
jump to these extremes, you can recognize the importance of both, but you could also see that these patterns keep repeating and repeating over and over again. And the evidence for that is just the stories that we follow, man. Look how many followers are of the, for example, Black Panther movie comes out, right? The
Oh,
original.
yeah.
I still haven't seen part two, but
Oh,
you saw part one, right?
oh, I've seen both.
I
Yeah.
love that scene where he's sitting, he sees that vision and his panthers on the tree, and his father comes to him.
Yeah.
What a beautiful scene! What a beautiful mythological story right there, man. I love that.
I love that, man. Hey, they
Yeah,
Marvel, they're doing their thing with their films. That's for
yeah,
sure.
they nailed it there.
Yeah.
Next scene I wanted to talk about is one of my personal favorites and the one that was formative in my upbringing, the Dagobah scene. Um, the entering of a dark place. Literally, time slows down for Luke. And in the aftermath of that terrible, frightful, swift confrontation, Luke sees his own face, which for many years was so puzzling to me as a kid, because my dad would never, first of all, he was the big fan. He was the dude who introduced me to the saga. He would never sit next to me shoulder to shoulder and explain imagery to me. I don't know why, whether it was his original intent. He's like, I gotta go to work or something. And that's the beauty of it, because when you arrive at a conclusion, even if it takes years, it is so much more impactful and meaning to you as an audience, as viewer, as a fan. And I was like thinking and deliberating, what could it mean? But the question I have for you, Steve, is what does the cave represent to you? What is its function in the story? What does Luke fear?
Hats off to your dad, I want to say, for getting you involved with Star Wars.
He's the man.
Yeah,
He still eats up every DC and Marvel movie I throw at him.
That's good.
Huge sci-fi fan.
And for your question, I've always wondered that myself. Like like you said, when he strikes Vader down, then the helmet explodes. There's his face. I'm like, what is that? And as you get older too, I find this a lot more with music, especially older music. Like the meaning you heard it when you were younger.
Right.
You didn't really, now you're like, oh man, there's some deep meaning in there. I've been listening to a lot of Matchbox 20 lately. So Rob Thomas is a lyrical poet. I just wanted to say that. But I think it's his own trial, his own test. Yoda talked to him. Hey, leave your lightsaber, leave the blast. Don't take nothing in there. He didn't listen. He goes in there. Well, obviously, he comes around the corner,
Yeah.
He immediately reaction, doesn't think. He doesn't have that connection with the Force. He's just being that anxious kid, because he landed in there and he was kind of cool with it. I crashed the X-Wing. What are we going to do, R2? Get the thing.
I'm looking for a great master.
Yeah. I'm looking for Yoda. That whole scene was just beautiful too, and hilarious. And to this day is so awesome. Him fighting R2 and beating him with the stick. but I think it's just his own. He wasn't ready for that experience. He wasn't ready to go out and test to pass that test.
Yeah.
And he failed, and that's what was showing him.
When I was a kid, I took the scene literally. I thought it was kind of like I didn't understand the concept of clone. By the way, the term Clone Wars was never interpreted in the Russian version of A New Hope because we had cheap tapes were illegal. You could only see Western movies officially in theaters, but tapes were illegal, so you would get them with cheap dubbing by generally one person who does like synchronous translation behind the the actual voice English voices. So I never understood what clones were. I was like, is that a double of Luke? Is that his brother, his twin? Like, what the hell? Like, I could never understand it, but it was a frightening scene. And as I grew older, of course, I get into Joseph Campbell and the Hero with a Thousand Faces and all of that. And it just dawns upon you, like, a lot of this stuff has to be at least swimming in George Lucas's subconscious mind, where he was throwing these extremely important, iconic images in a literal sense on screen, because it's the son fearing of becoming like his father. In this happenstance, the father is evil. He's absolute evil. But also, it's in a sense of a classical Greek motif, where if your father is a great king, he has great many accomplishments, you don't want to stay in his shadow forever. You don't want to be constantly intimidated or brought down by your father figure, who is perhaps jealous. Perhaps he doesn't want you to evolve because he wants to protect his own kingdom. Like Jason, how he goes the one sandaled foot that attains his own kingdom, rips it from his uncle's arms. Same here. It's Luke. He gazes up at that scene. Obviously, it's not a physical moment that happens to him. It's a vision. And what he sees is himself. It's like, if I strike Vader down, and Luke is not understanding it yet. It's the Force gives him a vision, and he sees it, because we circle back to that in the Return of the Jedi. He says, am I gonna become this absolute face of evil, and I'm gonna become like my father if I give into hatred and anger? And when then we return to that scene where he throws away his lightsaber, tells the Emperor, I'll never become that. He first looks at his arm. He's already becoming half machine. Again, I don't think it's through pure accident. I think it was very premeditated.
Yeah, that's a good point. Similar, a little different. You know, I never thought of it that way, of him wanting to become his father. You know, that was just me. He wasn't ready to continue on with his training through Yoda. Yeah, I mean, I know he just wasn't in tune with the forces, you know, possibly.
But in other words, he was stepping into the pool much deeper than himself.
Yeah.
Like he's like, better, tread cautiously there, right?
Right.
Yeah. But also one tiny detail that I wanted to point out in that scene, which I always found cool. As a kid, I personally loved all reptiles and lizards and snakes. That's just the coolest thing ever, dude. Even tried to have like a pet a snake at one point. But there are also snakes in the pit. There's like Komodo dragon right at one point, but it's also snake. Do you think it's a happy on the set accident that just happened during filming, or was George Lucas also putting those kind of like snake-like demonic or hell-like scenery in there?
Yeah. Well, I mean, in A New Hope, when they go down in the garbage disposal, there's that creature with the eye that's slithering and wraps Luke around. And no, I think I think George just really liked different types of alien species. Like he said that a lot. And when they redid the films, I mean, there was some added in there, right? He's just always liked more aliens, you know, all the behind the scenes documentaries and stuff. Get more species in there, you know? Yeah. So just probably something he just wanted to throw in there.
Giving us an exotic landscape.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Dagobah in that sense is one of my favorites. Just visually, the set design is out of this world, man. These movies just hold up to this day like crazy.
Let me ask you real quick, like,
sure.
What intrigued you into the imagery and the deeper meaning behind it? Like, what sparked that for you?
For Dagobah scene?
No, in general, overall, like the iconography.
Oh, that subject matter.
Yeah.
When I started college, well, first of all, in Russian alphabet, we have Greek letters, right? We have half Latin, half Greek alphabet. We share the same kind of like Russians at large. The Orthodox Church shares a lot of commonalities with Greek Orthodox Church, but also the classical Greek hero myths were translated into Russian animated films. Russia or Soviet Union has one of the largest libraries in the world of cinema, but also of animation. When I was going to animation school here in New York City, my professor would show animated Russian shorts without end as a prime examples of what animation is, which made me feel obviously very proud.
Yeah.
But that connection to the Greek heroes, a constantly understanding what the hero must go through was already kind of put into my subconscious mind. And when I started college here, my community school, taking classical courses, so classical Greek, mythology, and also the how do you call it, the Plato's dialogues and the politics, and the how do you call it? Oh my God, I'm losing my word here.
Yeah.
Philosophy. And philosophy, getting into all of that and understanding the subtext. I'm the kind of person who is huge on prehistory, huge on ancient history and mythology, and finding that uncovering the hidden, unveiling the shade, the darkness. And that's what imagery does to me. When I look at a lot of things, I like to analyze them. I'd like to try to understand what meaning it has there, but not only for me, for other people. That's why I enjoy interviewing you. Like, in which way does this image spark the mind? What elements does it activate? How it can potentially alter a person's life, right? Because so many film directors credit their careers to Star Wars. I want to know why. Like, what does it do to a person on the physical level? They're like, oh my God, this image is so powerful. I need to become a filmmaker.
Yeah. Okay. That's good. Yeah. I was interested when you brought this up, because it's like made me ponder a little bit. And then I'm like, Ben's really good with all this deep behind the scene stuff he likes to get involved with. So thank you.
But also the amusing aspect of it. No, sure, you're welcome. The amusing aspect of it is when you start interacting with fans in the fandom, how like we find symbology and everything. I find it, guys, please don't crucify me, okay? Please. I find the idea, the notion of, oh, it's like poetry, it rhymes. It's just like such a lazy explanation. Really, that's why you had 2 Death Stars, because it's like poetry, it rhymes. Like, get the hell out of here, man.
Yeah.
Because you could use and play with the familiar elements in such a powerful way that you won't automatically recognize, because, oh, we don't have a new extra super weapon. Let's put in the second Death Star. That's all there is to it. But fans always seem to try to find symbolism. You see his leg moved in this direction here? That's symbolic. It means something. It's so amusing, man. It's so funny. I love talking to fans. Like, but Ben, you don't understand. Let me explain to you.
Yeah. Well, yeah. But that's all. Sometimes that's fun though too.
It's fun. It's all in good spirit. We have just 3 more before we wrap it up. How are you doing on time? I'm not holding you up?
No, we're good.
We're good. Okay, excellent. The next one, which moved me a lot also, The Last Jedi is my favorite Star Wars film since 1983. I absolutely loved it. I recognize a lot of its flaws, but I would argue it has some of the most powerful imagery in Star Wars.
Really?
And this specific image I want to talk about is the Jedi Tree, right? The one where when we land on Acto and we meet Luke, and the whole, shenanigans there. It's a place of sacred text, because we see the Jedi archives there, right? It has a very powerful, thick trunk, but no leaves. There is no vegetation on it. And at the end, obviously, of the film, we see its destruction by lightning and fire. Why is a tree and not a temple?
It seems like even Lord of the Rings had a tree. Right. It's, to me, the tree almost seems to symbolize like a life force that, and I'm sorry to be referencing Lord of the Rings, but like the leaves fall down.
Right.
The elves are losing there's the whole meaning behind that. In Star Wars, I think that's the last hope, that's why the movie's called, well, I don't know why it's called, but The Last Jedi, but the last, we're holding on here, and then everything turns bad, the destruction, and then later on it starts to get its rebalance.
Interesting. So it's basically the last vitality of the Jedi, their last bastion of their safety, right?
Well, to me, yeah, because I mean, like you said, it's in the thickness. When you see an old tree like that, it's been there for some time. Like the roots are deep. but
Right.
then also all the scrolls and the text of what was left, is there.
Hmm.
I don't know. Well, sorry, I was gonna say I don't know why. Like, to me, maybe a temple would have been a little more, but I guess that was kind of already done through
Hmm.
some of the novelizations and then the
Hmm.
film.
I found the tree to be very, very significant. If you play a lot of role playing games, RPGs, especially Japanese RPGs, right? Like you just showed me your books with Final Fantasy. Tree is a significant symbol that transpired once again through all the folklore and mythologies of the world. The giant tree, the Yggdrasil tree, right, in Scandinavian myths. It's once again the life giver through which life
Yeah.
energy flows. And obviously, this particular Jedi tree is very thick. So it means to have very deep, deep roots. The Jedi religion is very deep. It goes
Yeah.
back, right? 10,000 years, 20,000 years. But it has no leaves because very interesting how you pointed it out that it's losing its vitality. It's slowly dying with holding on a thread here. Um, but also, I really enjoyed its destruction because you can't have a loss without a gain. You can't have death without life. One is not just the end, one is not just the beginning. It's a cycle. So, in order for something new to happen, something old must go.
Yeah.
Yes, the tree is burned, but Rey is able to get right? She gets the books. She's out of there with the books.
Yeah.
Yoda is there to say, "You dummy, you were paying too much attention to the books. Here is your hope. Here is your thread. This young woman, this young maiden who's changing your mind. She's changing history as is. And you're not paying attention. You're still stubborn. You're looking to the stars." He knocks him over the head. When Yoda came out in that scene, I literally turned into a 6-year-old. I was taken back. Like time stopped existing for me because
Really?
it wasn't just a nostalgic. Because hey guys, by the way, you remember Yoda? Let's put
Yoda.
Yoda here again. You can enjoy him. That little cameo thing. He was. If one thing I'm gonna give Rian Johnson credit for is he brought him at the very minutely precise moment, specific time where you have a hero that you never want to meet twice, because if you meet your hero twice, you will be disappointed. And this is broken and disheveled Luke Skywalker, who is completely disillusioned. Here is your hope. Here is your moment to learn again. Even in the twilight of your years, this young woman, and indeed she does change his mind because he does come through with his friends. He does save the day. To which extent of it, to which success, we could argue. You may like the movie, you may dislike it, but we could say that he accomplishes that at the end.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. It's been a little bit since I watched them. But yeah, you're right. He does that kind of precise little timing when he pops up and he tells her,
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah.
You know what it is? I find a lot of disconnect with modern cinema where the picture on the screen and the quality of writing is sound, but the filmmaker is unable to elicit any emotional in you. And to me, that is the art of visual storytelling. You could have very simple dialogue, very simple script, but you need to evoke an emotional response, whether it's love, hate, anger. The Last Jedi evokes a lot of anger and a lot of fans. In my mind, it means it holds a potential energy to it. If it's completely devoid of any power, then it's just we forget about it tomorrow. It becomes, do
Yeah,
we remember
that's true.
Van Helsing movie
Yeah.
from early 2000s? Who's talking about
No.
that movie? Like nobody. We just like
The
brushed
book.
it off. What?
I said the old book, from not the movie that I don't even know who directed
No, the
that
book is an
movie.
entirely different story. I'm
Yes,
just talking
right.
about the movie.
The film, yeah. But yeah,
We're not
I don't
talking
remember
about
that. No, but you're right. I mean, you are right. And I like Disney. I don't know how to explain this. Like, I'm a fan of all of it, really.
Right.
Some of the films I like more than others, some I don't, but
Of course, yeah.
but yeah, I think you're right because that movie still gets talked about a lot today,
Yeah.
a lot it's brought up,
Yeah.
So yeah, it holds some.
I learned to recognize patterns and relate to my fellow fans because I interview a lot of guys on the podcast who are huge prequel fans. And I often quote myself as a closet prequel fan because I do enjoy a lot of elements in them. I just unfortunately felt they weren't very well put together films. The stories in those films are powerful. The way they're presented, I hoped for more. But
Yeah.
it's still very exciting and interesting to me to see how it moved perhaps you or perhaps another fan say, "Oh my God, when Anakin delivers this particular line, that represents so much in my life." Who am I to kind of counteract that and say, "Well, hold on a second, let me just change your opinion here"? Why do that?
Right.
Right. So in that sense, it's all subjective. If you worship and love a certain film, I applaud that.
Right. And I will say too that we grew up with Luke. Some of the younger generations grew up with Anakin.
Right.
Now there's a generation of kids that are growing up with Rey. And
Yeah.
that's cool too.
Yeah.
That it truly is. She's their Luke, like she was to us, or her Anakin, you know what I'm saying? Like, so
The
it's just,
cycle of life, it must change. It must
just gonna
move.
keep going.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I love it. And I love hearing people you interview. I love the same things, hearing their different
Yeah.
thoughts and what moved them and what touched them and how they got involved in the Star Wars in the first place.
Just like there isn't a single definitive version of Batman,
Right.
because not thousands, dozens of different authors wrote him and drew him. There are many different versions of Luke Skywalker. Pick the one you like.
Yeah, exactly.
Next one I think is probably my favorite, and I would say the strongest of icons in the Star Wars prequels. Darth Maul. This grotesque, horrifying Oni mask. Oni in the Japanese cultures are these evil demonic creatures, evil spirits. This flowing, yes sir, his flowing, shape concealing robes, which until the very end, until he throws away his cape, you never quite understand what the heck this creature is, especially when he attacks Qui-Gon on Tatooine. Why is he so visually striking?
It's the first time we've ever seen something like that besides Vader from the films. Like, you don't see him, like you said, he's coiled. You got the image, the hollow cam is not showing much, steps in, does his thing, and then I remember that moment, everybody was like, holy, It was just powerful, and the evil and the dark, and it was twisted, and there was been nothing like that. Even now, I'm just like, it was Darth Maul,
Yeah.
Just
one of the best George Lucas's inventions, hands down.
Oh yes. Yeah, I mean, he just instantly became a fan favorite immediately. Like overnight, everybody was talking like, did you see that? He had the double bladed and he did the thing. So yeah, just that image is just powerful on its own. It just shows that evil, and plus we never seen another Sith. Like, we didn't really know much
up
about
until
them.
this point, right? It's only Vader and the Emperor.
Yeah, that's it. We didn't. There was none. So
yeah,
there's another.
I think now we've seen more of kind of like a Sith in his prime, a Sith, the prime example of their military or something. If they had an army, which again, that was being expanded and rhymed upon in the prequel related expanded universe. They started giving us more Sith, the Sith Empire and Tales of the Jedi and all of that stuff. But also, what does he represent?
Darkness. Just the yin to the yang, in a sense. It's that evil assassin that's gonna cripple the good.
Wow, I like how you put it. That's cool. Cripple the good.
That was the plan. That's what was intended. That happened up until.
And when you say cripple, you mean the death of Qui-Gon Jinn, if I understand correctly?
Yeah, I'm using in the Star Wars kind of
right.
side of things. Yeah, I mean, he took out the father, really, essentially.
Nice.
So.
Nice. Qui-Gon is a great point that you bring. Qui-Gon was much more of a father to Anakin than he was a teacher.
Yeah.
Kenobi is his teacher. He never quite becomes an authority. They share kind of like a love and a bond, and Kenobi shows them the rope, but Anakin never sees him as this authority figure as much as he did Qui-Gon.
Right.
And thus, the duel of the fates, what could have been if Kenobi stayed his master.
Yeah. And they touch upon that a little more in the book, and I had the quote.
Oh, they do.
But I don't have it with me. I highlighted some things.
If you want, bring it up for the next podcast. We'll read it aloud.
Yeah, but it was, yeah. So
Nice.
it's just, that's what I think of that.
When I was watching The Phantom Menace, unfortunately, I didn't have a very good experience of it. I hated the movie. I couldn't believe what I'm looking at with Star Wars. I was so passionate and so adamant of it being the greatest movie that it needed to be.
Yeah.
I was 19 when I saw it. I was like, oh my God. But the Darth Maul scene was just brilliant, just amazing. And I wanted him to just remain the villain for the next two films, for the whole trilogy, and then get killed off at the end. Because as a fan of the originals, we knew who Palpatine is since the first second we saw him.
Yeah.
So the whole illusion is kind of like, you kind of reveal the trick to us. And like, we're no longer surprised. But also, from the beginning, Darth Maul is not the villain. What I really enjoyed about him in that film is that he's the agent of evil. He's the instrument through which Palpatine cripples the good. He's just there to serve, right? He doesn't even have lines in the film, like 2 or 3 lines.
Yeah, not much.
And it's so effective and so powerful. And I just can't help to return to that Phantom Menace end scene and like, oh my God, what if Maul would stay in the live action films for all 3 movies?
Oh, that would have been incredible. And I think George realized that, and it's been talked about numerous times. Like, darn it. I can't do his voice or his impression, but I could just see him just like, shit, and obviously they brought him back in the animated series and they found a way to bring him back because he, like I said, he was instantly a fan favorite.
Yeah.
And still is.
So a little off topic. How do you like that Kenobi on Maul final duel scene?
I had to watch it like 3 times. Because I'm going to be honest, right away I was mad. I'm like, what is this, 3 seconds and what? Here I'm like, I'm prepping. I'm like,
they're going to go at it, right?
Yeah. And then it's just, jump, done. But the end scene was kind of touching,
Yeah.
It sounds weird, but it's
no, I felt it, man.
Yeah. Watched it back, and then I believe I seen Sam Witwer talk about it on a podcast or something, and then his explanation of it as well is pretty good. But it was just Obi-Wan going through the motions through the years and beating Maul at his own game.
An absolute master, yeah. Where Maul has the same exact stance and Kenobi adjusts to it because he is a changed man, but Maul never does, and that's the tragedy of him. He dies not a Sith, but just this fallen, broken shell of himself. I don't believe he was a Sith at the end because he abandoned them because he said, Palpatine and everybody else, they abandoned me.
I was gonna say, I mean, on another topic some other time, but like, what if scenario with Ahsoka if he would have had in the final seasons of Clone Wars,
Interesting.
Yeah,
interesting. That's definitely a topic for a discussion for a podcast.
For sure.
Steve, before I hit you off with our final question. At the end, I'm going to have very short, very quick, stupid, silly questions, and you can answer them however you like. And guys, once again, please go check out Stevie link. I'll leave it in the video description below. Sir, it's always a pleasure. It's super fun to talk to you. I love your channel. I love how you talk and think about Star Wars.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for having me. And you inspired me, sir, and you still do.
Thank you. Final question. This one is perhaps a little bit uncommon one, but I like to think about this. The imagery of the Jedi High Council chamber versus the Sith throne room at the Rise of the Skywalker. Both are circular. The Jedi room shares windows, it invites lights, and whoever enters it, like Qui-Gon and young, Anakin, they're in the center surrounded by the Jedi. The Sith throne room is also circular, but it's deep, deep underground with this like very foreboding light and just a shaft of light coming through. Why the circular configurations, first of all?
Well, the whole Star Wars franchise or the story behind it is always about balance. Right? Circular. We hit this a few times. It just keeps going around, like it keeps going through its motions and time and the way things play out. the yin and the yang.
Right.
You need it. I think the good and the dark, the good and the evil, the light and the dark. The circular puts you at center stage around their religion is what, in a sense, in Star Wars. If you're following me,
I definitely do. Yeah.
I thought you were gonna. I was hoping you were gonna bring this up because, yeah, that's just interesting to me. I was thinking about that earlier. It's like, yeah, it just made them. And why is there 12 on the Jedi side of things, right? Compared to there's just dark underground, nothing. So that's kind of my thought behind that a little bit.
And we also noticed that the Jedi chairs are all in the same level with the person who is addressing them in the central room versus the Emperor's throne, which is much, much elevated from the ground. Like, I also found that very, very significant, didn't you?
Well, there's always only one. Like, there's only one devil, if that's the thing. There's always one. I mean, obviously the rule of two, the master is always going to be here.
Right.
The apprentice that's craves, it's always going to be here. There's never going to be this. So the one compared to, okay, we don't have a single person that's our master.
Right.
There's a bunch of us wise ones that have been around a while, and the Force,
like Arthurian Knights of the Round Table, right? Like we all share experiences and wisdom, and everybody has a say, right?
Yes.
Like a democratic society. Okay.
Yeah, that could, the politics side of things too. I mean, I know that's a topic inside of Star Wars too, but yeah, that's perfect.
I also enjoyed, like, it's very seemingly very obvious thing that the Jedi room is very light and the Emperor's one is very dark. Obviously, we get that.
Yeah.
But the fact that it has just open windows speaks to you, like, look, we are transparent, we're open, everybody's invited, and everybody's also open to scrutiny. Because at one point, young Anakin stands there, Qui-Gon stands there, Kenobi stands there, other representatives. So it's like we all check each other. Nobody attains that higher power. And that's why the chairs are on the same level. Because, right, when you look at the European monarchy, the throne is always elevated. Because I am above you. I look down on you. You're my supplicant. Not among the Jedi. You're admitted into the ranks of the council members because through your personal deeds, through your show of wisdom, and temperament, and that kind of thing, your personal values. But not for the Emperor. Even at the end, I think part of his downfall, what you mentioned, is there's supposed to be only two. Even the Emperor, he forgoes even that rule. He's like, I'm just going to suck the life out of these two kids, and I'm going to be the only one. Yeah. And his own rule, ironically, turns on him. He's like, no, dude, you can't have that. You're not going to have two? Bye-bye, you're gone.
Yeah.
So I just found those very, very interesting imagery. It's like Rise of Skywalker. I have a very bittersweet relationship with it. The more I watch it, the more I enjoy it. But it's very hard to defend as a film. There's like so many. I feel like there was 2 or 3 films spliced together into one montage with all the nuance just being thrown out of there.
Well, yeah, and it's them films kind of had their ups and downs, obviously, with the 2 directors and time. It seems like that's one thing I'll say, and I think a lot of people agree on lately, is just the timing of things seem to be, they just can't get a good grasp on making things happen, I guess.
Yeah. My main critique would be to the trilogy. I genuinely feel that every filmmaker, every director, Kathy, besides being like crucified by fandom, everybody intends to do their best to please the fans, have the best product in their hands, because it's good business, it's good practice. You make your fans happy, they're going to return for more. But it was just rushed out the gates a little bit too quickly. The story was too undercooked, especially with The Force Awakens, how they rewritten the script too early, and so forth and so forth. But there genuinely are great ideas in sequels as much as prequels, I would say.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, hats off to all of them. The actors, the characters. I mean, Kylo Ren's cool. Like nobody, it's just, maybe if they would have took a little more time. But we can always what if, right? We can sit here and do that all day.
Yeah. Let's be happy with the fact that we have more Star Wars to enjoy, and you can pick and choose what you like. Steve, remember how I told you about my stupid questions that I prepared for you?
Nothing stupid, man.
Okay,
my answers
these are
probably stupid.
I tried to make them, so please try to appreciate the stupidity. Okay. Question number 1.
Sure.
If the Emperor Palpatine released his own limited series Sith Bible, what animal would he use for the leather binding?
I'm gonna say a cheetah.
A cheetah?
Yeah,
Ah,
we'll give that color, that the spots, and
a
just a little.
premium finish.
Yeah,
Uh,
just a little spice it up in there for him a little bit. You know.
I think he would use Ewoks just to show the galaxy. Like,
Oh, inside of
you
Star
mess
Wars.
with me. I know
Okay.
it doesn't matter. Any answer is good. Ewoks. He's like, you want to mess with a Death Star? Here's a special edition right here. Ewok skin.
That's good. I was
Yeah.
giving him some feng shui. That's what I was doing.
Yeah. Okay. Question number 2. If Gungans could flap their ears, would they fly? And if they did, where would they build their nests?
Oh. Ooh. Hmm. You stumped me on this one, man, for sure. Yeah, I'm trying to think of in Star Wars if they could fly.
Any answer is fine.
Alabama.
Oh, in Alabama?
In
Why
Alabama.
Alabama?
Because they like that get a little sun, a
Oh,
little,
just
a little heat.
good natural habitat.
Yeah. Plus then they could do laps around the Talladega Super Speedway.
I would say they would fly and they would probably nest upon the Naboo trees, whatever that forest was
I
called.
was going to say Naboo, but I couldn't think of the forest, so I didn't want to.
Yeah, it's just that forest. With
Yep.
that, like with those statues, right? Those ruins.
Yeah, because they had their secret getaway was in the murky forest.
Yeah.
I can't think of the name of it now.
I love looking at those concept drawings
Yeah.
by David Chang.
Oh, they're so good.
Awesome. Yeah.
So good.
Naboo. Third one. If Lando and a droid had a baby, what would they call it?
Cognac.
Hmm.
I think Lando would drink a nice or
Cognac?
cognac for D2.
That's very high lifestyle for him.
Well, he's a classy man.
Hmm.
He's a
I went
classy
for
man.
something more computerized, kind of like to appease the missus a little bit more. So I went with Landix.
I like that.
Landix.
What number? We're gonna give like
Hmm?
Landix 9 or something like that.
Landix 9. Yeah.
All right.
What version is Linux on right now?
Oh,
I don't even know.
mm-mm.
But that's my name. And the last one. If Obi-Wan Kenobi wrote a play, what would he call his last movement?
In the play of him doing the a movement.
He wrote a play, yes.
The high ground surprise.
I was going to say the high ground. I have the high ground. Because you got to end up on a high note. Like, I scored. I got you. I fulfilled the mission, right?
I didn't want to go with that because that's used so much. But yeah, that
you got to lay the smack down. Yeah,
right?
Right?
For sure.
You got to show. Look, Steve, it's been really, really awesome. I really appreciate it. I think I'm blessed that we have more Star Wars.
Oh,
and if you guys ever feel that you are oversaturated with it, that it doesn't follow a certain path that you've enjoyed, trust me, there's tons and tons and tons of expanded universe material, canon novels that you can explore just outside the films and enjoy. Steve, your last words to our fans, and hopefully we get to bring you here soon again, and we'll talk some other stuff.
Yes, thanks for having me on. And you're right, there's so much, and I'm still learning because even in the expanding universe, the legends, there's so much. The canon, I've read both, I read both. It's crazy. There, like Ben said, there's so much. I'm grateful for you, sir. Thank you again.
Likewise.
For having me on. I love your insight, your input, your thoughts. It's crazy. What's inspired me. Yeah, I'm having fun meeting new fans, creating fun content, interviewing them. I had an author on. You can check me out. I'm on Instagram now. My kids talk me into that. Stevie B_YT. I just post pictures of my collection and stuff like that. But yeah, just having fun.
Which, guys, I'm not jealous of his setup at all, which took him like a month to put together all that wonderful stuff behind him. You look at my setup, it took over a year. Oh. He got his thing together so quickly that I'm kind of like, in a good way, in a positive sense, I'm jealous.
Well, thank you, sir. But that's a nice, classy setup that you have there. Everything looks
It
top
took a
notch.
minute to get there.
It looks good. I love it. Yeah, I kind of got a room together here, and my wife was like, "Yeah, go ahead and put all
Looks
this stuff."
awesome, man.
Yeah, so I thank you. I appreciate that, sir.
Likewise. Well, guys, here it is. We talked about some theology stuff. If you enjoyed this podcast, let us know in the comments below what other topics would you like us to go over. Please follow Steve's channel. I'll leave all the important links in the description below, and we'll catch you guys next time. Take care, everyone.
Yeah.